you know, in these PowerPoint presentations, you know, audience might have a hard time reading what's on the screen. So this is basically the title of my presentation. And first of all, let me tell you about a few things about the problem that I'm trying to address. Well, previous studies conducted in Central and Eastern Europe and China have discussed the role of various forms of capital for post-socialist entrepreneurship. And here's a discussion. You know, some people emphasize the role of social capital, other people emphasize the role of cultural capital, while others the role of political capital. Well, in terms of political capital, in some countries such as Romania and Bulgaria, former communists are, I'm going to use this phrase, you know, born-again Christian. They are not born-again Christians, but they are born-again capitalists. For instance, statistical analysis tend to indicate that former party cadre, which is party officials, have higher chances to become large entrepreneurs in Romania than people who are not party officials. Well, this former party official variable actually captures an individual's social capital. And by that, I refer to inclusion in certain networks with privileged access to information and financial resources. Well, contrary to predictions made by Ni's market transition theory, the importance of social ties in post-communism has not decreased. While in post-communist Romania, among other countries, the persistent significance of these social ties have led some people to believe that, or to say that, well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now, I personally, and this is what has driven me into this field, I have had some problems with previous studies. And, well, the first thing is that such studies have ignored the fact that the so-called socialist era social ties have come in many different forms and shapes. And we can distinguish between bloc, you remember bloc, right? I mean, those who speak Romanian, bloc, relations, relații, pile, cunoștințe, relații. Then I might distinguish also political patronage, relationships, instrumental relationships. So these previous studies that I'm arguing with have failed to acknowledge the diversity of these social ties. If this is true, and I tend to believe that this is true, then the next question will be what types of social ties have survived and how have they been transformed during transition? Then again, how has the content of these communist era ties changed? And by content, I refer to trust. And if this content has changed, how? Now, in the background, the data that I'm using in this presentation comes from a personal research I conducted in 2000 in Romania when I interviewed 35 entrepreneurs. Now, in order to avoid the fallacy of sampling on the dependent variable, I also have to include in my sample former entrepreneurs, that is, individuals who have gone out of business for various reasons. Now, I've conducted additional interviews and observation post-2005, which is the unhappy moment of my return back to Romania. So, but this is just to give you the timeline. Obviously, my availability sample of entrepreneurs, current and former, included business people who worked in various fields, such as services, commerce, transportation, agriculture, but most businesses were registered as being able to operate in mixed or multiple fields. Now, I'm going to present right now some of my main findings. Now, it seems to me, at least from the interviews I've conducted with these people, that the importance of prior social ties for starting a business seems to vary by business size and profits. That is, prior ties to party officials seem to matter more, again, for starting a large business. Such ties, connections, have been used to gain access to financial resources, customers, information about imminent privatizations, so on and so forth. So it's an old boys network, if you want to put it this way. Now, one of my respondents best summarized the importance of these ties by business size as follows. And you can read, I'm going to briefly read from my notes here. I was asking him about connections, how important such connections are. And the guy was telling me, well, connections to start a small business, having connections, I mean, prior connections. It's here I'm talking about prior connections to official. So having connection is not so important. You can make your connections afterwards. You don't need connections to start a small business. All you need is a well-functioning brain. In Romanian is telling me, totul este mai bine. As regards money, well, you don't need plenty of money to start a small business because you can always borrow the money from family or friends, and you don't need that much. To start a medium-sized business, he was telling me, I would say you need more money, and then some connections, and again, brains. A big business, here's where you need connections. At this level, once connection come first. Doesn't matter if you don't have the money. If you have connections, off you go to Bank or X, get a big loan, and get yourself started. Now, those of you who have lived in this country, you all recognize the name of Bank or X, which was, for those of you who don't know, it's a bank that went bankrupt as a result of its loan granting policies. They used to give loans on political reasons, and that's why it went bankrupt. But at the time when I was conducting the fieldwork, Bancorex was such a big name in the Romanian banking system, and also was deemed a corrupt bank. Then, or as another guy put it, to start a small business, you have to be somebody yourself. You have to know people, important people, otherwise no one will take you seriously. If you know the right people, some damn functionaries or other hotshots, and he used to tell me in Romanian, șmecheri politici, you have no problem, absolutely no problem starting your own business. How do you think I got started? So the guy was a former big-time communist turned entrepreneur. I had no money whatsoever, but I knew such people, and they helped me out with loans and contracts from the government. I knew these people from before, from Uncle Nick's time, which is many, right? When we were seeing each other at party meetings and briefings with all the other party secretaries. Now, it was interesting because only 3 out of the 12 to 15 former party officials that turned entrepreneurs, only 3 out of these people openly were willing to openly talk about their past, right? Now, this was one guy who had no problem in talking about his previous career. So it's a dialogue between me and the interviewer, that is me. So let me see if I understood you correctly. You said you were a cadre before, right? And he was like, yes, big time. I was like, wow, that's amazing. You're now a businessman. Well, some people might view this as a contradiction. And the guy went, a contradiction?
Yeah.
There's no contradiction here. I was a good communist, and I'll be an even better capitalist. So this guy had no problem. But then again, most of the former politicos I interviewed claim that their success in post-communism was due to their individual merits, qualification, merits. Even one guy told me that God help him, which was sort of contradicting. He used to be a party secretary, but he turned religious. It was so, but they were unwilling to accept that, you know, prior connections did matter. However, when I was talking to these people, I was able to observe inconsistencies in their story that really contradicted the story they were, you know, telling me. Again, they were smart, they had managerial skills, they had talents, or whatever. Now, as I previously mentioned, well, having such prior ties is less important for starting smaller businesses, such as being a self-employed individual. Yet, making and cultivating such useful connections is crucial for staying in business. Relations, in this case, in terms of vocabulary, covers a wide variety of ties, from business relations to relations with employees and government officials at all levels. Now, in terms of connections with various officials, making connections with such officials meant give a small tip, bakshish, you know, give a small attention, o mică atenție, or to be nice, or give gifts and rights to supplier, big cups, city hall employees, representative of various state organizations, from health and safety inspectors to representatives of the financial guard, which is the Romanian equivalent of the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Let me now move to the issue of trust, but I need to drink some water. Well, in terms of trust in businesses, there are two major opposite views. A Nobel Prize winner like Williamson claims that it's better to keep arm's length relationship in order to have successful economic enterprises. While people such as Mark Granovetter, who operate within the new economic sociology paradigm, claim that trust is a lubricant for successful economic transactions and businesses. Now, if you read the literature, you see that there's a distinction between what some people call generalized trust and interpersonal trust, one-on-one. But in terms of generalized trust, there are some people such as Fukuyama who claim that, for instance, high generalized distrust negatively impacts economic growth and prosperity. Well, Romania, if you look at survey data conducted either in 2000 or more recently, 2007, 2009, Romania, by survey measures, is deemed a low trust society in terms of generalized trust. This is usually captured by answers to the question, do you think that most people can be trusted or not? Well, in 2000, less than 1/3 of all Romanian respondents in the nationwide survey agreed that most people can't be trusted. Well, but then again, if you look at all EU countries, 2007 and more recently, Romania ranks the lowest in terms of generalized trust among all EU countries. Now, interpersonal trust, which is what we look at when we analyze entrepreneurship and business relations, can be influenced, and some say it is influenced by generalized trust. Some say that generalized trust usually translates into low levels of interpersonal trust. However, some experiments conducted by Japanese and American sociologists in both Japan and the United States, such experiments have shown that conditions of high uncertainty or high generalized distrust can lead to commitment formation among exchange partners, which is high interpersonal trust. This is the the theoretical stuff or bullshit, if you want to say this. But this is what I found in my research. Like the overwhelming majority of my respondents were highly distrustful of others. And when I say of others, I include here sometimes even family members, but business partners, associates, customers, employees, and obviously, like all business people around the world, government officials. Now, the level of distrust was so high, and it reminded me of things I read in a study written in '58 by a guy called Edward Banfield. And he wrote a monograph on a village in southern Italy. And he's the guy who coined the term, if you probably know this term, amoral familism, to describe no-trust relationships in such communities. By amoral familism, Banfield was trying to say that trust was confined to one's family and not extended to outsiders. And this is why he was claiming people in those communities in southern Italy have a hard time, in working together, and this impacted the economic well-being of their communities. Now, here I have two quotes from my distrustful respondents, but they were distrustful with others, but they trusted me with their information. So, well, this guy was he was funny because, as you can read if you can read the first paragraph, he was trying to tell me, well, I generally trust other people, though I regretted it at times. But he ends up by saying that one needs to be careful. So he said, I generally trust other people. When we lose any hope if we distrust one another. However, on this point, I have a personal opinion. They tell you personal opinions. I mean, all opinions are tend to be personal, but let's say verbal tick. There are some people who, biologically speaking, look like all other people, like you and me, but they are not people, and they lack morals. So one needs to be careful. And then there's the second guy who's one should trust most people. You know that saying, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. But do I really know who my neighbor is? He's having an argument with himself. And you trust people and they take advantage of it. It's wrong to distrust people, but there's no other way around it. And now, what might be the sources of this trust? Some of them claim that, or invoke as a main source of this trust, the recent past, and some of them held extremely negative views of the recent past. And here's an illustration. Like this guy was telling me, some say Romanians are thieves, and therefore one should not trust them. But I say, look at Italians with their mafia. Look at others, Arabs, Turks. I would say Romanians are good people. Yes, my dear, deep down in their heart, they're good people. It's communists that taught them to steal and to be lazy. Ceausescu made us distrust one another. Whom could you trust back then? And he invoked the Secretary of the Secret Police as a source of this trust. Now, others claim that it's post-communism that is ultimately responsible for these high levels of distrust. Some of these people who blame post-socialist transition also held very positive, idealized images about Ceausescu's period, when allegedly Romanians trusted one another more than they do now. However, this is, speaking about the current times, one of my respondents claimed, it is the times we live in and the greed That's what makes things difficult. Everybody wants to make money, fast money, because nobody knows how things will be tomorrow. Then how could you trust your partner? No way. Partners are after each other. So if you have a partner, you better keep an eye on him, because you might never know. It's like in that old Romanian proverb, guard me, Lord, against my friends, for I can guard myself against my enemies. Okay. Yeah. Now, other important sources of distrust in the post-communist period were the so-called low bureaucratic integrity or administrative rationalization of the Romanian system. A second important source was the volatile bureaucratic structures of the Romanian political system. And my respondents, being volatile, that's my label, but my respondents were referring to the fact that state bureaucrats tend to be replaced after each local or central elections. Now, this leads to a high degree of uncertainty because obviously my entrepreneurs make great efforts to contact, cultivate, and maintain useful connections with various bureaucrats, right? But, you know, they cannot maintain these relationships of medium or long term because bureaucrats, once again, are usually replaced with new bureaucrats after every election. So they don't know whom to ride anymore. So it's really expensive for some of these people to stay in business, right? Then, predatory behaviors of state officials at all levels. And if you remember, I invoked, like, especially small entrepreneurs have to give bribes and small attention on a daily basis just to stay in business. And such small attentions are given, you know, to, once again, to health and safety inspectors, city hall representatives throughout the country, representatives of the financial part, so on and so forth. Then another major source of this trust was the legislative instability. And by this, they were telling me about repeated and chaotic changes in laws that govern business licensing, registration, and taxes. Another source was the extremely difficult access they had back then and even now to banks to get loans. Some of them told me that they had to bribe private banks clerks to get loans. But this happened in 2000. I don't know whether it's still the case. And obviously another source of distrust referred to extremely high taxes, but this is a common complaint among business people throughout the world. So usually business people complain about high taxes. Now, effects on businesses, and I will conclude with this. The system's lack of predictability obviously negatively impacts business formation and growth. More important, it's the political factors that, at both central and local levels, that seem to affect businesses, both in terms of formation, growth, and growth. And based on the observation and interviews I've conducted since 2005 and more recently, I would say that the effects of the current economic crisis have been greatly amplified by the two factors mentioned previously, and especially by the influence of politics on doing business.
We have time for questions.
This final
Yeah, I think the two are related if you look at the general background in terms of what type of post-socialist regime do we have in Romania. And my impression is that Romania comes the closest to the variant type of political capitalism, which is a type of capitalism, but it's different from the Western rationalized capitalism, right? It's a type of capitalism where people can make huge profits being protected by political authorities or through unusual deals with political authorities. So I would say the lack of trust or the distrust that I witnessed should be seen and should be linked with this, I would say, this overall feature of Romania and, if you will, Bulgaria, post-communist countries. This is
Any other questions? Questions? Are you sure? Okay.
Sorry, I'm really curious because I'm also working with businesses. Your whole argument is based on the assumption that communism is something really different from capitalism, or from the presentation. I believe such interpretation can be bold. But here I'm referring back to a celebrated debate between Miliband and Gulantzas about the state, in which Miliband was arguing that the personnel of the state, who is controlling various state apparatus.
Obviously, origins are important because some people claim that we're not building capitalism on the ruins of communism, but we're building capitalism with the ruins of communism. And I would say, if you look at data, economic and social indicators regarding Romania, Poland, the former Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, in 1989, right? You'll find significant differences among these countries in how they were doing on a series of, once again, economic and social conditions. And I think these issues are important. Obviously, such issues tend to be overemphasized by people working within the path dependency approaches, right? Like one of them. Now, origins are important, but I think that what happened after the collapse of communism in all of these countries is equally important. I did not address this here because it wasn't, the scope of my presentation. By what happened after the collapse of communism, one can invoke, for instance, whether communists have managed to stay in power after the first elections. And for instance, if you only consider that as a variable, you will see once again significant differences between, on one hand, former Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, on the one hand, and Romania, Bulgaria, on the other hand. In both Romania and Bulgaria, former communists managed to win the first 3 elections. And in Romania, they managed to win the second 3 elections. This is why I think it's important. It's equally important what happened right after the collapse of communism. There are other theories that attempt to explain, in other terms, why post-1990 period is important, but I'm not going to mention that here. So I tend to believe origins are important, but they are not the only ones that matter in this story. Now, one final comment, and I don't know whether I answered your questions, or we can talk more afterwards. But when I speak about communism, capitalism, obviously I'm talking in ideal And I don't make any ideological assumptions. I've never implied that communism is something that is bad, and capitalism is the future of humankind.